There's a question that moves through Christian circles. Will the temple be rebuilt? Join us today on Back to Our Roots as we explore that possibility. Welcome once again to Back to Our Roots. I'm your host, Pastor Alex Schussler. This is my co-host,
Rachel Hyman.
And we are so happy that you've joined us today. You know, over previous shows, we have dealt in small portions with the temple and the idea. But today, we're going to talk about an aspect that we haven't really touched on, and it's a real hot button in Christian circles. When will the temple be rebuilt? Or
will the temple be rebuilt?
Will the temple be rebuilt? You know, Rachel, have you had any conversations with people with regard to that?
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's a movement that feels like, I'll tell you the most intense experience that I've had is when people come up to me and say, "You're Jewish? What are you doing living in the United States? I mean, you need to go back to Israel or else the temple will not be able to be rebuilt unless you're there, because all the Jews need to be back in their homeland before God has the capability of building up the temple once again." And I'm like, okay, and supposedly I'm an offense to some people because I've chosen to live in America.
Wow. I haven't had that, but I certainly have had my run-in with people that, again, like I said, it's a really hot topic. We're going to explore several different aspects of it today, from both a Jewish perspective, from a Christian perspective, and what does the Bible, more importantly, have to say about whether the temple is in fact going to be rebuilt. Before we go any further, let's bring out our resident scholar,
all right,
our friend, our brother, Sasha. How are you today, my brother?
I'm good. Good to see you, Rachel.
Good to see you, Sash.
Good to see you, Alex.
Good to see you, too. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
You're doing well. So, Sasha, our topic today is the temple, but more importantly, when will the temple be rebuilt? Sasha, if we were to go back, and let's just first start off by talking about a purely Jewish perspective on the temple. I know that on my visits to Israel and to Jerusalem, there is a society that has formed there that they are actually reproducing all the different elements that the Levitical priesthood would need once, since they believe the temple will be rebuilt. Once it is rebuilt, they're going to have everything in place. What do you think about that, Sasha?
Well, yes, I've been to this Temple Institute.
Yes.
And I know very well Rabbi Glick, who is the director of this institute. I've seen this huge menorah, which they've built, with the money of Vadim Rabinovich, the president of Jewish community in Kiev. A couple $1 million. They told me about the issues they had. They couldn't build it like it says in the Torah, from the pure gold without having any metal support for it. Otherwise, it collapses on itself.
Right.
Then he shared with me some other issues they're having. Like, for example, they have no idea how to come up with red heifer.
Right. I've read about that they keep trying to have that pure red heifer that's required as far as what the Torah says.
What are they trying to make happen here?
Well, they need an unmarked red cow. Can't have any splotches or anything, because if you go back into Torah, it was the ashes of the red heifer that were used to purify the Levitical priesthood.
But in rebuilding the temple, what are they trying to make happen? Have the Messiah come back or something?
Well, this is the very important thing.
Well, let's not get way ahead of ourselves, because that's jumping way to the end today.
Okay.
I want to spend more time about what actually is happening and what they're doing.
Okay.
Yes. What's happening is Judaism is divided on the matter. Judaism is strongly divided. You have American Judaism, such as Reform and Conservative. they do not believe in rebuilding of the temple. So about 60% of American Jews, Reform and Conservative, don't believe in rebuilding of the temple because they are rational people and they understand that attempt to rebuild something on the Temple Mount will cause World War III. So that's what their rationale is.
Well, first, people have to understand also that the place where the temple would have to be built is right where the Dome of the Rock is.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to tear it
that
down.
mosque would have to be removed from the Temple Mount for the temple to be rebuilt.
Wow.
Like Sasha said, for that to happen, it would be World War III. You know what's crazy, Sasha, is I remember many years ago when the Scud missiles were being launched at Israel, there was this running joke going around that one of the Scud missiles was going to hit the Dome of the Rock, and that's how God was going to clear the Temple Mount. Of course, we know that that's not what happened.
That didn't happen. You know what's interesting? Other things about this, Israeli government could do it back in 1967. Moshe Dayan was there at the Temple Mount with Israeli paratroopers, and he consulted the Israeli government, and the Israeli government consulted the rabbinate, and because they say, what are we going to do? We kicked everybody out there. Should we blow it up and clear the place? And Israeli government consulted the rabbinate, and the rabbinate said, no way you're doing it. The rabbis forbade this for two reasons. Number one, first of all, if you go beyond the wall of the Temple Mount on towards the Olive Mountain, what you see is a big, big cemetery.
Right, an Arab cemetery.
Yeah, a Muslim cemetery. Yeah. So if they blow it up and started building it, from the Levitic perspective of Levitical law, which they have to literally fulfill, they will all be impure.
Right, because you can't dig back up the dead like that.
Now I had heard, Sasha, is this true that one of the reasons that that cemetery was placed there in the first place was the belief that Messiah had to enter through those gates, that Jews believe that, and that this cemetery was put there so that that wouldn't happen?
Actually, Muslims, it is not a problem. It was put specifically by Muslims. Muslims knew the trick. They wanted the cemetery right there to the Temple Mount, specifically to prevent rebuilding. What the Orthodox Jews, they do believe in restoration of the temple. But the Orthodox Jews, they believe that they cannot do it on their own.
Right.
Even the people at the Temple Institute who know the blueprint and things like this, there is enough brave people among the religious Zionists in Israel who could attack this Temple Mount and do whatever they want to. It's not a lack of bravery. It's the clear understanding from the perspective of Judaism that the Messiah has to come first. Messiah has to clear those dead graveyards with dead bodies, purify the area, and that would be a sign, a command for them to move in with building equipment and start building.
Now remember, we're speaking right now in terms of a Jewish perspective.
Yeah, that's how Judaism believes, and Christianity doesn't, Christians really are not aware about this.
Right. We'll get to the Christian perspective in just a few minutes. Is it also true, Sasha, that there are quite a few in the Orthodox community, I'm talking about in Israel, that really reject the statehood of Israel, saying that it was formed by man and that the state has to be formed by God?
Oh, absolutely. Some ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews, they do not accept the state of Israel.
Even though they live there?
Yeah. They've lived there even before it was created. But they've lived there for a totally different reason.
Right.
They moved in there maybe late 18th century, and when the modern Zionist movement, which is, by the way, absolutely secular, moved in, they opposed them, and they oppose them until even now.
So let's talk a little bit about the Christian perspective, okay? Within the evangelical community, this is a big, big topic. It's based on a dispensational view.
Right.
And it's based on the idea that God is going to, at some point in time, is going to remove all the Christians. This is the idea of some would call it the secret rapture, but is going to remove all the true believers, okay, before the tribulation takes place. And then he's going to turn to the Jewish people, and whoever the Antichrist is going to come on to the scene at this point, and based on wrong interpretations, I would say, I believe, of the Bible, the whole idea of the 3.5-year pact that's going to be made, and it's during that time that the evangelicals believe that the temple is going to be rebuilt, and that the Antichrist, whatever position he's in, will orchestrate things in such a way that the sacrificial system will be reinstated. And then at the end of that 3.5 years, he's going to break the pact with them and is going to defile the temple. And then these big wars take place, and it's at the very end, when it looks like there's no hope left and the world's going to come to an end, that the Jews cry out and Jesus comes and saves them. Okay, this is that dispensational view. But as you mentioned at the beginning of the program, it's really predicated, one, on the idea that all of the Jews are going to be rounded up and are going to be brought to Israel.
And some people believe that if the Jews are not in Israel,
Messiah won't come back.
Messiah won't come back.
This whole thing. Well, I have always found that a little ludicrous, that God is dependent
relying
on
on
what
us.
we do.
Yeah.
That, the plan, his plan, and that the return of Messiah is based on it. Sasha, what do you think about that whole thing? Well, obviously, we don't agree with that line of thinking, and we're going to talk about in just a few minutes what the Bible has to say and what we believe the Bible has to say. But what are your thoughts on that Christian perspective? The evangelical Christian perspective.
This Christian perspective is absolutely so far from the reality, and it has no biblical foundation.
So maybe let's start talking about what does the Bible actually say when it comes to the temple being rebuilt, or not?
Well, the best text for the Bible, we do have texts that, and we'll have to discuss this, large prophecy, large vision of Ezekiel, but look at Matthew 24. Matthew 24 is very specific. They come to, the disciples show to Jesus the buildings of the temple, and Jesus says, there won't be stone upon stone on this at this place. Everything will be destroyed. I won't take it, too far. Some people say that the destruction of the temple is the punishment for the Jews, but it is not any punishment. The destruction of the temple is, in fact, the signification of the end of the ritual system that pointed out to what is happening today in the heavenly temple and what happened on Calvary.
Right, and it also signifies too, I think, Jesus is saying that with the complete and utter destruction of the temple, you'll never be able to go back to it.
Exactly.
Right?
Jesus is very clear. And Paul is very clear about this. He discusses this under the umbrella of the Old Covenant. And he clearly says that the Old Covenant has to be, has to be done away. And the heart of the Old Covenant is the sanctuary, the earthly sanctuary, to open the way to the heavenly sanctuary. So when the evangelicals who are so staunch defendants of the new covenant, talking about the restoration of the temple. What, is this a return to the old covenant? Are we reversing the history of salvation?
So,
What are they missing?
Everything. Let's talk specifically. I want to spend a little bit of time with Ezekiel's prophecy. Why don't you talk some about that to us?
Yeah, that's the foundation which is used. Although I have to say, and we'll deal with this, the real foundation is the text found in 2 Thessalonians, where it says that the man of sin, son of perdition, will sit in the temple of God. And so, if he has to sit in a temple of God, then we have to find that temple. So Jews have to come back and rebuild the temple. And so let's find where the temple, the prophecy, Ezekiel 40 through 48. That's the prophecy which is chosen for the restoration of the temple. And indeed, you have here, Ezekiel has a vision, but where he's shown the new temple and what needs to be done. He sees this heavenly being walking with a measuring rod, measuring everything. So it's basically a blueprint. It's basically like Moses saw the tabernacle. Ezekiel sees this magnanimous temple. To be honest, if you look at Jerusalem today, the old city and everything, to actually place this temple, you have to really destroy half of the old city, mostly the Muslim quarter. And that's a war. And to me, always been like, how can this be? Evangelical Christianity is always emphasizing, non-combatancy, peacefulness, and things like this. And now what they're saying is, hey, Jewish boys, go to Israel and go to war. It's kind of nice, isn't it? They're not sending their children to fight with Muslims, these preachers. They're sending our children to do this. And what I'm saying, it's not my opinion. This is what the rabbis are saying when they discuss this evangelical position. This is how Jewish society receives such a quote-unquote prediction. It's very offensive. How come these Christians are telling us to go to war for their cause? We don't need that.
Are you passionate about that, Sasha?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
I'm very passionate.
So how are they, if we're going back to the prophecy of Ezekiel, where is it that they're, in that prophecy, where are they jumping off in the wrong place?
Well, I believe that the key is to understand the last part. You got to read the entire vision. It's huge. It's from 40 to 48. Yeah. You can't just glimpse at it and say, that's the temple. Since it wasn't rebuilt, it should be rebuilt because the prophecy is to be fulfilled. Well, first of all, people don't understand the function of the prophecy, or prophecy.
Or of the prophets.
Yeah, of the prophets. The prophet is to change the way of the people.
Right.
It's the apocalyptic books that predict the future. Prophetic books, often the prophecy is not fulfilled. Jonah is the best example. Nineveh was supposed to be destroyed in the 40 days. It wasn't. Right. So, yes, this prophecy was given. This was a vision that was given to the people of Israel, to the Judeans, which were in the Babylonian captivity, and that's what they were supposed to do. One of the things why this cannot be applied today is it's when you look at starting from chapter 43. That's the description, and especially when you go to 46, 47, that's the description of the prince.
Right.
Yeah. This 46, 2 through 6.
Right. So let me read a little bit of this. This is chapter 46, verses 2 through 8. The prince shall enter by the vestibule of the gate from outside, and shall take his stand by the post of the gate. The priest shall offer his burnt offering and his peace offering, and shall worship at the threshold of the gate. Then he shall go out, but the gate shall not be shut until evening. The people of the land shall bow down at the entrance of the gate before the Lord on the Sabbaths and on the new moons. The burnt offering that the prince offers to the Lord on the Sabbath day shall be 6 lambs without blemish. And it's going to go on to this whole list of all of these offerings. And then finally, at the very end, when the prince enters, he shall enter by the vestibule of the gate. He shall go out by the same way. Does this show? So then, the question is, does this passage, because it sounds like all these offerings and everything, I guess people want to take this and go, see, this is, the prince is the Messiah, and look, you have all these offerings being established after he comes.
And what kind of sense is this? Messiah offering sacrifices?
Right.
This is not right.
That'd be weird.
And who is that prince? It doesn't look, because in evangelical perspective, it's like the Antichrist, So is this the Antichrist? Or look, this is the Prime Minister of Israel? Who is that prince?
I guess the bottom line is, Sasha, that this whole long passage of several chapters, is this meant to be taken literal, which is what people are trying to do?
This was literal to the time.
But to the people.
To the people. No, not for today. This was a command which Ezekiel was to communicate to the people of Israel upon when they would come out of Babylonian captivity. The problem is that not all Judeans went back home from Babylonian
captivity. Right, and we know that a lot of them stayed behind, even though many of them came out to rebuild.
And that's the reason. You have to read the book of Ezra. In the book of Ezra, they laid the foundation of the temple, and it says that the number of priests who knew the previous temple, they started crying. Because that foundation was so small.
In comparison to what they had seen before.
So, in fact, we have a clear description in the book of Ezra that this task God gave to Israel at this time was not fulfilled, because only all the people had to come out and do it. Otherwise, there was not enough resources. And therefore, we cannot take it and bring it literal for today, because as you can see, it just makes no sense. The restoration of the sacrificial system after the Calvary.
Right. Well, we'll jump on that in just a minute. I want to go back to, look, you've already alluded to 2 Thessalonians. Right?
Yes.
And that is very commonly used in the context of the Antichrist.
Oh, yes.
Okay, as I talked about, that he's going to make this deal with the Jewish people for 3.5 years, and then he's going to break it, and he's going to defile the temple and sit in the seat and so on.
This is all fantasy, which is not in the Bible.
So what do you think Paul is really talking about?
Well, Paul is talking about someone sitting at the temple of God. No talk about the deal with the Jews. No talk about all this defilement. Somebody sits at the temple of God. What is the New Testament? What is the temple of God? Where is the temple of God in the New Testament? It's clearly up in heaven. Hebrews talk about this. Revelation is talking about this. So that Antichrist affects the sanctuary in heaven. And we don't have time to talk about this, but the book of Daniel, chapter 7, the book of Revelation, chapter 13, is very clear that this Antichrist is a system of false priesthood that exists in the church. The priesthood that for many centuries during the Middle Ages prevented people to enter the real heavenly sanctuary by creating a counterfeit sanctuary system, including even the counterfeit sacrifices.
Right. Well, in previous programs, we've talked a couple times now about the temple. Where is the temple now? And when we ask somebody, where is the temple, we typically get 2 answers. Temple is in heaven, yes, but we have seen the temple also exists in another place. Temple exists, as Jeremiah said, in the hearts of God's people. So I guess the punchline is when we say, will the temple be rebuilt? I could probably comfortably say it already has.
Yes.
At Pentecost, the temple of God was rebuilt in the hearts of the true followers. That we now are the traveling temple wherever we go. As I had said in previous shows, we are the Mishkan, which is the tabernacle in the wilderness. And that's what God wants us to do. He wants us to be able to move and present His truth to people wherever we go. Rachel, it's time for a song. Sasha's going to tell us all about your song.
Yisamach Moshe, Moses rejoiced. The song talks about how Moses received 10 commandments on the Mount Sinai.
Yisamach Moshe b'matnat chilko ki eved ne'eman kadat lo. Yisamach Moshe b'matnat chilko ki eved ne'eman kadat lo. Kelim tiferet ve'rosh natat lo.
Wow, Rachel.
Fun song, huh?
That's a fun song. Boy, that's a vocal workout, too. Beautiful, beautiful. So when someone asks you the next time, what do you think, when will the temple be rebuilt? You can just pat yourself and say, it already has. If you know Jesus, it's in your heart. So may the Lord bless you and keep you all the days of your life. Join us once again as we celebrate the Hebraic roots on Back to Our Roots.